Hello, this is Joe Firestone for Empowering Democracy. Topic for tonight is How Can We Make It Happen, Part 14. And I am here with my three compatriots, panelists, specifically Gregory Mallard, activist extraordinaire from Georgia, and also Dolores Peers, one of the co-hosts of Around the World with Brandy and Dee. And I'm here with Brandy Weaver as well, the other co-host of Around the World with Brandy and Dee. And so I'll start by saying we got pretty far last time. We made a final decision to put the fragmenting the CPC idea on the back burner for a while and to focus on the Dump the Corruption movement, to start that off very vigorously first. We prioritized the shows that we're going to try to get on, and our decisions on those as to which to seek is set pretty well now, and we can go ahead trying to get on those shows. So that was all to the good. Now we have to address the form, the quality, the character of the Dump the Corruption show itself. Okay, I pointed out that within the larger Empowering Democracy framework that I intend to have 3 shows a week at first that will focus on the Dump the Corruption movement and building that particular movement. So tonight, I thought it would be appropriate to go back to the Dump the Corruption idea itself and talk about the core logic of that idea, because that's the idea we're going to be pushing in order to start a movement, and also talk about the strengths and weaknesses that we can envision for that idea and for that movement. So I thought it might be a good thing to do to go over the logic of Dump the Incumbents first. So I've got a little slide presentation on that. I think this is the right slide presentation. I have 3 here on Dump the Incumbents. So I hope that, yeah, I've got this in there now. So let me put this into, okay, let me share it. I thought I did that already, but it's not sharing, so let me see what's going on here. I just got to add it to the stream. So this is a pretty short presentation. It's not going to take us a long time. So the title of it is, of course, Dump the Incumbents, because I haven't had the time to change the Dump the Incumbents title, which was the original form of what we were talking about here, to Dump the Corruption. So every time I say Dump the Incumbents, please envision Dump the Corruption. So moving to the first of the slides. That is entitled Donor Money Stops Change. Point one. This is basically a set of talking points. Point one. The needs and desires of most people cannot be addressed by the U.S. government because senators, the representatives and senators cannot pass laws opposed by big money donors who fund their campaigns and allow them to market themselves between elections. Two, so big donor money from wealthy individuals, corporations, party committees, PACs, and super PACs is toxic to we the people, and we must remove the big donor money from politics. So note in this point that there are 5 sources of big money to focus on when we're evaluating whether candidates are taking big money or not. We have to look at the contributions from individuals, from corporations, from the party committees that are laundering money from all the other sources, from the PACs, and from the super PACs. And here we have to note that the super PAC money does not go directly to candidates because, in theory, it's an independent expenditure and it's not supposed to be coordinated with the campaign. So since the Supreme Court ruled some time ago that money is speech, the theory here is that the super PACs are nothing but the exercise of speech. And they're not directly supporting candidates, so they're not a part of campaigns. So people have a right to say what they want, which means to spend the money they want in support of the various campaigns. Well, we can't be fooled like this. What we have to do is to look at what is really going on. If big money is appearing in support of certain candidates, as it was all over the country in the latest election, we have to see it. We have to recognize where it's going, whether the people who were getting that support intended to get that support themselves or sought the support. We can't get into evaluating that. If they've got that support, it's poisoned their campaign because it's toxic money that's going to help them. So we have to look at it, in that way. And accordingly, we have to activate the litmus test, which is don't vote for people who are taking any big donor money. So, we voters can remove the big money from politics ourselves. Point 3 is that we can't do it through legislation, constitutional amendments, or lawsuits because our legislators and SCOTUS judges are bought by the big donor money. By the way, the president is also bought by the big donor money. However, voters have the power to do it by themselves by making accepting money and or benefiting from it toxic to those who accept it. Point 4, voters can do that by following the rule of ruthlessly deciding to vote against incumbents or candidates who accept or benefit from big money, regardless of the personal characteristic of the candidates or the political appeals she or he but tries to offer. We ought to look at some examples of this. For example, Pramila Jayapal. She's the author of the Medicare for All bill, H.R. 1976. It's a terrific bill. She claims to be a democratic socialist herself. So some people find this all very attractive. But when you look at the money she has been taking, she's been taking a considerable amount of money from healthcare interests, something like $70,000 in contributions annually. So it's perfectly clear that whatever face she puts on it, we have to assume that she's corrupted to some degree by the big money, and we ought to be voting against her. Here's another attractive candidate who claims to be a progressive, specifically Ro Khanna. Now, it's well known that Ro Khanna doesn't raise all his money from small donations. He's got Silicon Valley benefactors. Part of his district is in Silicon Valley. We have to assume that he's going to represent the Silicon Valley donor interests before he represents the regular people in his particular district. So those are two examples of don't be fooled by the surface attractiveness of candidates. Go find out where their financing is coming from. If it comes from the big donor money, the rule is vote against them. Ruthlessly decide to vote against incumbents or challenging candidates who accept or benefit from big money. And once again, regardless of the personal characteristics of the candidate or the political appeals she or he is offering. So here's what voters need to do. Point 5. In cases where more than one candidate or incumbent is taking big money, then voters should vote against all candidates taking the big money and for a candidate that is not taking big money. 6. If all incumbents and candidates in a race are taking big money, then the voter should vote for the candidate taking the least amount of big money. And point 7, if we all act this way, by all I mean all the registered voters, if we all act in this way, we will make big money toxic to the politicians who take it or who get it, because our voting against them will drive them all out of office and end the careers of candidates who take that money. Now, as a matter of logic, as a point of logic, this is really a pretty simple connection. If all of us were to act according to the litmus test, then we would probably replace something like 410 of the incumbents and candidates who were taking big money. We would basically throw them out of the race and have a wholesale change to the membership of Congress. If we get that wholesale change, we're also going to get a change in the rules of the House. We're going to get a change in the rules of the Senate. It may take longer to get rid of the filibuster than just one cycle, because only 1/3 of the Senate is turned over every 2 years. So we might have to go through 3 cycles before we get rid of the toxic money in the Senate. But with that kind of performance, we would get rid of the toxic money in the House in 1 cycle. That would be like an earthquake in D.C. A total earthquake. There would still be some candidates, especially candidates for the Senate, who would try to stick with the big money, who would resist the revolution we are putting through. We have to expect that. But if most everybody is voting against candidates who are taking that money, the money will be toxic to them. They will lose. They really won't be able to resist. They'll have to go to the voters for support. Without the money, that's their only alternative. Why? Because the money is allowing them to market themselves and to persuade people to vote for them. Once people realize it's the money that's doing that, it's the money that allows them to mislead the voters. It's the money that makes them the representatives of the donors and not actually the representatives of the voters. There are going to be big changes coming. There we go. Point 8. Within 3 national election cycles, big money and the donors who give it will be driven out of all elections, national, state, and local. Yes, I want to apply these rules not just at the national level, but at the state and local level too. The arbiters of our elections will then be we the people once again, maybe we the people for the first time. Point 9. Office holders will then have to turn to voters and only voters for support, and the legislatures will have to pass what people want them to, including hashtag M4A, hashtag GND, student debt elimination, paid family leave, child tax credits, checks and compensation for inflation, low-cost public housing, the federal job guarantee is part of the GND, a basic income for those who are not able to work or who cannot fit into the market-based system. I can't see something here. Let me see if I can get rid of it. No, I can't get rid of it. I can't see it, and I can't exactly scroll it. So let me go back. Now let me just exit the full screen so I can see that last. Okay, and ending foreign policy seeking full spectrum U.S. dominance across the world. So, here's the conclusion. Hashtag dump the incumbents is not about pursuing electoralism. Because the first objection people are going to make to this, this is electoralism. You're relying on elections. But it's not pursuing electoralism, because electoralism means basically taking a look at the candidates competing with each other, see who's closest to your views, and vote for that person. That does not work because the donors can set up the situation that even if there is someone closest to your views, that someone is likely to be very far away from what your views are because of the influence of big money on the views of the representatives. So this is not about pursuing electoralism. In that sense, it's not about trying to make elections clean in some kind of a mechanical sense. Okay, it's not about uh, um, actually protecting elections from people who are trying to rig those elections. I mean, it's partly about that, but it's not primarily about that, because even if you succeeded in doing this, since the donors have bought the representatives, even if they come into office through a fair electoral process, the very fact that there is money in that process is going to corrupt it, and it's going to stop the representatives from actually representing the people. So, if this is not about electoralism, what is it about? It is about disrupting electoralism by getting people to vote against big money in politics as a fundamental principle, by firing all the legislators who take that big money. It is about making that money and its influence over incumbents toxic to the incumbents and to the challengers, by the way, who are taking the big money, so that money will be driven out of politics by voters to be replaced by the demands of people expressed through mass movements, protest activities, general strikes, unions, alternative media, and people's pressure campaigns on legislators across the board. So, this is not being proposed in preference to the mass movements, the protest activities, the general strikes, the unions, the union movement, union protests, alternative media. No, it's being proposed as a supplement to those things which will go on and which will be helpful to our movement to dump the corruption. What this is about is making the legislature safe for what the mass movements, the general strikes, the unions, and so on want to accomplish. We don't want to have a situation where the unions are overwhelming in their strength, where everybody's engaged in general strikes, but when our demands get to the legislators, they still don't pass it because they're thoroughly corrupt and they're thoroughly opposed. We have to ask ourselves a question like, how would people like Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries, how would they respond to general strikes? How would they respond to union activity? How do they respond to union activity? How do they respond to protest activities? They would just pass whatever legislation they would need to suppress it all. They certainly would try to satisfy as few demands of the movements that they could get away with. As few as they can get away with. In other words, at the end of all the protest processes, there's a choice. Either we bring a revolution in the classical sense and remove the legislators that way, or we bring a dump the corruption election movement and remove them that way. I'm still of the opinion that it's preferable to remove them by peaceful means if we possibly can. Now, it may not be possible. It may be when they see us coming and when they see what happens in terms of the elections, they fix the system in some way so that it can't be effective again, or they just pass some laws that function as a coup d'etat. so that we still can't get our stuff through. How do we know that? We know that because that's what happens in Latin America all the time. We have these elections of people who want to do something for the people, okay, in general. The mass movements are strong. They go into the streets and they even win elections. And what happens after that? The United States helps them to coup the legitimately elected people. That is the kind of thing that would happen here. Our rich people would still coup those that we elect. So, we have to get so many of our people elected. It has to be so overwhelming that everybody knows if the rich try to overturn it, then there will be a classic revolution with people going into the streets. So the final point, it is about creating the primacy of bottom-up politics in America and the end of the political oligarchy. It is the general strike of voters against money in politics. That, okay, is what we're doing. So that's the presentation exposing the central logic. Okay, I now want to open it up. So what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses of this approach?
The weaknesses, as far as I can see, would be making sure that we've got more options, which is where what I've been doing or trying to start working on now is at least making sure in my state. But I'm willing to work with third parties on the national level if need be to try to make sure that we have more options on the ballot so that we've got an option on the ballot to vote for, because you can't elect somebody if they're not on the ballot.
Absolutely.
So we've got to get the third party options on the ballot. And that's where I'm trying to work with people in my state. And I've possibly got one person who's formerly worked with the Democratic Party and is no longer a part of the party, but still votes the majority of the time for them, now willing to run for a third party seat here in Arkansas, especially after the way things were handled with the railroad strike or railroad workers here. They're angry enough to run.
Right. So the approach assumes that third party candidates are going to emerge.
We've got to get to work on that. And we need to start that now.
Right. We do. I'm sorry Madelyn is not here for this one so she could hear this. We do have to get to work on it now, but not necessarily us. Now, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't do it. Okay, I recognize and admire that you want to go out, okay, and do that work, Brandy. But for us as a movement to try to do it ourselves rather than leaving it to others, we still don't have the resources to do that.
No. We need more people to.
We need more people to take on that aspect of the problem too.
Yeah.
Okay, but I feel very confident that when people see the dump the incumbents movement starting to work, when the polls are showing this, that people who are not directly part of our movement will take it upon themselves as an opportunity
Yep.
to get third parties that they want to see in. to empower them, because they will know that there's at least a fair chance that the incumbents and others who want to replace the incumbents but who are taking big money will be leaving, and that there'll be a clear field for them.
Yeah, and people need to understand that even if, say, they don't have the Green Party or some other party able to run on the ballot in their state, most people can get enough signatures to run as an independent, and that independent could choose to caucus with the Green Party if elected.
Right, and it's also true that some states do allow write-in candidates.
Yep.
A few years ago, when Lisa Murkowski uh, was beaten, okay, in the Republican primary, she ran um, as an independent write-in candidate who was not on the ballot. Her name was sufficiently well known that she won. And the radical right guy who was in opposition to her got beat.
Yep.
However, I don't know how often that kind of thing would happen. It was pretty rare, and Lisa Murkowski could do it because, first of all, she had the money to run such a campaign, and people were very familiar with her name because not only she had been the senator, but her father had a big name, okay, in Alaska politics too. So most everybody could spell Murkowski. And of course, that's a factor when you're doing a write-in campaign.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some other weaknesses?
We've got to make sure that people understand that this is not us trying to shoo them back into the two-party system, because the two-party system isn't working for them. So I like that you added that in there about it not being voting in for the Democratic Party or going solely on the partisan politics. Because I think that that was a little bit of a misconception during last time when you were going on some shows talking about dump the incumbent. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people misconstrued it as you're wanting to bring us back into the party and we don't want to be a part of the party. So,
Yes, yes. That was one of the reasons why we changed it
yeah,
from dumping incumbents, to dump the corruption. There was also the confusion that people thought that we maybe were for whoever the challengers were, and that was a kind of misunderstanding that would be very damaging.
yeah,
Uh, but also, this goes further. In other words, the idea, okay, of dump the corruption goes further uh, than the idea of dumping the candidates of the two major parties. Uh, the Dump the Incumbents campaign itself doesn't have a party bias. It's about getting the big money out of politics.
and to do that, you're going to have to bring down almost every, well, you're going to have to at least get enough people in who are not allied to either party. So if they're
Or,
not a part
or
of a
they
party,
if they are allies to some party.
but I mean, they're not allied to the Democrat or Republican, because they need to be willing to put their foot down. See, that's why everybody's so upset with the squad,
Yes,
is because they had promised that when they got in there, they were going to raise a ruckus.
yes, and they did raise the ruckus,
We want people
and they
in there who will
appear to,
raise the ruckus.
and they appear to be doing vote blue no matter who. That's an aspect also. Uh, this was particularly visible in the contest that Nina had with Chantel Brown. Okay, the second time after Chantel Brown won the first time, okay, in the second contest between the two, Chantel Brown joined the CPC, and then the CPC had a rule saying, well, if one of our number joins, we cannot oppose them. So Jayapal used that as an excuse for endorsing
Yeah.
Chantel Brown as opposed to Nina Turner, when it was pretty obvious that Jayapal never wanted to have Nina Turner in the Congressional Progressive Caucus at all, because Nina Turner was obviously going to give her a run, not Chantel, but Jayapal, okay, a run for her money as the chairperson of the CPC.
And then where Nina messed up is one, she sat there and told everybody, if you're upset with the squad and how they vote, you're going to be upset with me.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Number two,
She hasn't said anything about that.
number two, yeah, she said that on, what's the name of that show? The one that Steve Grumbine's on quite a bit.
Oh, you
Status coup.
Status Coup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Status Coup. Yeah.
And so number two, her mistake was, and this is the mistake of a lot of the squad as well, is they're no longer backing BDS.
Yes, I know that was a mistake too. When they folded about that.
When they folded about BDS, when she folded about BDS, and I realized that us in America, it doesn't affect us the way it does the Palestinians over there. But this is their form of a peaceful protest. So if you're saying they don't have a right, you're not going to support their right to peaceful protest. If you're not going to support them, you're not going to support us.
Right. And that was a very, very bad thing to have done. And what it also symbolized was that depending on the issue, they would be prepared to cave if it was a tough
Exactly.
politically for them. And frankly, we had no interest in electing any more cavers. We've already got too many cavers.
Yep. And so Nina lost a lot of support in that campaign due to her caving the way she did. And the squad has lost a lot of support. Some of them barely held on to their seats.
Oh, yes, I know, in spite of the fact that they had raised a lot of money.
Yeah. And a lot of them are now taking the donations too.
Oh, you mean
Their
from
PACs.
Oh, they're taking PAC money donations.
Yeah.
Are they taking donations from party committees now?
I am not 100%. Stabby has covered it and gone through it and outlined it as to, and some of the money that they raised went into PACs that went into fund, say, Biden's campaign. So
Okay.
they're using their PACs to, several of them have their own PACs now, and they're using their PACs to do that, to fund the neoliberals
Yes.
that we don't want in there.
Yes, they're taking our money
That we donate.
and
And
transmitting it to the neoliberals who are working against us each and every day and working against them because
Yeah.
they want to support some party rule. It's like party dues that they're paying by
yeah,
transmitting part of our money. It's thoroughly corrupt.
and it's also a way of them trying to buy committee seats.
Yeah, and what they should have done there was to have taken a stand and said, look, we can't do this. It breaks faith with our representatives.
We
We
promised them
not
we
going to
wouldn't
do
do
that.
this.
If you insist on this, we're going to declare ourselves, okay, as independent.
Mm? I mean, look at how easy Christine Cinema or what
Kirsten
Cinema
Cinema.
Kirsten Cinema did.
Yeah, that's what she's doing.
Mm?
Oh, and by the way, she's starting to get some pushback from Schumer now in the Senate. They're going to do something to her. I don't know what exactly, but they're going to do something, some kind of slap on the wrist.
Yeah, it'll be just a slap on the wrist, and then she'll turn to the Republican Party instead and start caucusing with them, which changes power over. And Tom Cotton's been trying to get her to caucus with them since she came into the Senate. He's admitted to that in interviews, and he's my senator, so.
Yeah, if they get her to caucus with them,
They have power.
that's fine. But from the standpoint of the Arizona voters,
Mm-hmm.
they will then identify her as a Republican. Uh, and that hurts her from the standpoint, okay, of the voters, I think.
Well, I'm shocked. Well, was her seat up for re-election?
It is in
24
2024.
it is.
Okay, in 24 it is. So it wasn't even on the ballot in 2022. So
Right.
they may wind up replacing her anyway,
Right. And
because they'll run a Democrat against her since she's independent.
yeah, right. And she also seems ready to march into a big job in the private sector that's, going to pay her a lot of money. And I think she's been pointing for that anyway for some time. So she's
Yeah,
probably preparing to leave and will act, with that, okay, in mind.
and if she served long enough in there, she gets her benefits, her retirement benefits, and all that jazz.
Yes. Yes. And that, I'm
So,
sure, is important to her because it's free money.
yeah, that's, I think, most of them's goal is to at least stay in there for that long, um, so that they've got that income
Uh,
and then get lofty seats. But we got to start doing our own lobbying.
yes, we do.
We've got to start bringing more people in to this because it's going to take it. We've got to get enough people elected who will raise a ruckus, and you're not going to get that from either party.
Yes, I agree.
And
I'll
either party's still going to continue to take the money until we give them a reason not to.
Okay, so how do we address the credibility weakness? Okay, in other words, we're coming along, we're trying to start a movement. What the movement is about
Mm-hmm.
is getting everybody to form a collective and act according to a rule. And really, the first objection of the smart money, okay, is going to be, I don't think you can do that. I just don't think people are going to join together to do this.
Well, I think having the one of the areas of confusion for people is when you say, well, if they both take big money, vote for the one that takes the least big money. You need to have the option for people to not vote for either one of them because they take the big money. And that's where having a write in candidate, having a third party candidate on their consent. So people are going to have to organize in their local areas because we need this not only on the federal level, we need it in our school boards, we need it in our city, our counties, and our states.
Right. So, what we have to advocate for is at whatever election we're talking about, the people themselves have to put up a candidate
Hmm.
in case it's necessary to have to vote against both of the major party candidates because they're taking the big money.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way to field a third option that is not taking the big money.
Whether it's independent or any other, I mean, you can look at Ballotpedia, you could find over a dozen third parties, and you can use Ballotpedia as a great resource in your state to find out what the voting laws are in your state and candidate laws.
I know
And
here in Georgia, the only third party here that does have ballot access at all is the Libertarian Party. They have ballot access. The Greens do not, because in 2016, when we were trying to get Jill Stein on the ballot here in Georgia and get permanent ballot access, the then acting Secretary of State, which was appointed by former Governor Sonny Perdue in 2010, he struck us down.
mhm.
And I was also talking with a friend of mine, or with a couple of friend of mine's earlier, about the dump the corruption even on the state level, and they're all for it. And both of them ran in 2018 and 2020 for the Georgia State House of Representatives. Neither one of them took any corporate money. They did not take any of it at all. They actually were calling out their primary opponents for attending PAC meetings, attending dinners, and everything else with the corporate cohorts. And so this has been what we are discussing here. I've been trying to do it here in Georgia, even on the state level, since 2018.
All right, and you've been finding it promising,
Yeah,
the idea of dumping the corruption.
and I've been talking with my friends who did run for office, and we're going to be talking with more people as well, and we're wanting to do a dump the corruption movement here in the state of Georgia on the state level. We were talking about even on the national level, but we also need this more so on the state level, because a lot of people don't realize is a lot of the most important things policy wise happens even on your local and state levels. And that's what we have found over the course of the last few years, that there's a lot of extreme amounts of corporate PAC money. And I've even called out my own state rep who was fixing to become our state speaker of the House. I've even called him out publicly on going to ALEC functions and everything else. And he turned it away.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to sit back and just not say anything even in their own face when I see them in public. I don't care
Yeah,
if
I
you
know.
get uncomfortable or not. I am going to call your ass out on this shit.
Okay, the response I would make to that objection is that we've come so far in terms of our political system, and there is such frustration with the two parties and what they do, and such a great amount of cynicism concerning what they do, especially the establishment, okay, the two parties, uh, that the frustration has created a certain amount of actual hate, and that's a driving force. And if you're talking about actually dumping the corruption, That's something people can do to really make them hurt. I think there are many, many voters out there who want to make the representatives who have been screwing them for years really hurt. But because of the way the political system operates, they haven't been able to figure out a way to do it. Dump the corruption idea, okay, is a way for them to do it. But to come back to the objection, I'm still not sure that that's a force that's strong enough to drive people to come together to do this on a mass basis. And that's where this lives or dies. If we can get the mass movement behind this going, then we can make it happen. If we fail to generate the kind of mass movement that's needed for this, it isn't going to be successful.
Yeah, and that's where you've just got to basically explain to people who say that they want this or they want that. Well, as long as you keep pushing for the same status quo, we're never going to get it.
The only way we're going to get it is if we do something radical and different. Yep. This is something radical, okay, and different.
Your choices are
disrupts conventional politics.
Yep. So your choices are vote for a third party or a revolution. Which would you rather?
Right. And you've got to do something because collectively, these two dominant parties are killing us. We can see that. They're literally killing us.
They're killing the planet. They're killing us. They're not working for their citizens. We've got people who are dying because they cannot afford health care. I've got a friend whose husband is dying from cancer. They just found out like a month ago that he had it and he's already been put into hospice. He went into the emergency room for the flu and he had the flu, but his white blood cell count was off. And so they checked him and found that he had cancer.
What stage is he in?
Give me one moment. Because she's a part of one of our Red Berets in Arkansas. That's how I met her. And they just bought a house. They haven't been married for very long. And so she's not been with him. And she's been with him for years, but they haven't been married for like a year.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. And she's taking care of him now, plus working and dealing with everything else. And she was also sick with the flu at the time. I'm trying to find where she put exactly what type of cancer it was. But I mean, that's just the whole point, though, is they're not doing anything for us for medical care. COVID is not going away. The pandemic is not going away. We've got increased deaths on the flu and RSV, which is very dangerous with children who have pediatric health issues or preemies. They do a special shot vaccine to prevent. If Katie gotten the shots when she was an infant, she still wound up with RSV, but it kept her from getting it as bad. So she spent a week in the hospital. Whereas with her being on oxygen and a monitor 24/7 at that time, if she would have not had the shots, it could have killed her. I could have lost her to RSV. So, yeah. I mean, they're just not doing anything for us, and they're trying to destroy the planet. Our kids and grandkids are not.
Yeah, and the reason why they're not doing anything for us is because their donors don't want them to do anything for us.
No, and it's all about the money.
And it's all about putting profits over people.
I
Yes.
Yep.
found a video, and this was, I don't remember what year this was from. And I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, and it's of a reporter with 11 Alive News out of Atlanta, Georgia. And he went to a hotel down in Savannah, Georgia. And at this function, this was an ALEC sponsored event where they had politicians there. It's a bill mill. And what they uncovered by a former ALEC member who left the whole deal, that they have these backroom meetings where even the corporate lobbyists vote on the bills before they're handed to your state politicians. And the same bill can be passed around through Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi,
Yes.
Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, any state. The same bill can be passed around.
And they have a model bill, basically, and they give everybody the model bill in every state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one
And
of the
I
things,
shared this video in our Facebook chats along with the YouTube comments as well, because I found it very intriguing. By even my own state representative was at this ALEC function, and I called him out on it after I found out. And then what people also need to do for the state level of dumping the corruption is you need to go online to ALEC Exposed and look into see if your state rep is also affiliated with this organization as well.
Right.
And
It's now 10 o'clock, and we still have to go through comments. What I would like to ask is, would you like to continue this discussion tomorrow of weaknesses and strengths, of course, but it's good to uncover as many weaknesses as we can to
yeah,
see if we have an answer to the weaknesses.
I just want to add one more thing that I point out to people, because especially living in my state where we have a Republican supermajority, we still get more stuff passed through ballot initiatives. And whereas California, remember what happened with CalCare?
I
And they
remember.
had a supermajority Democrats. The Democrats still wouldn't give it to them. They wouldn't even do a vote on it.
I
So
remember.
just because they're a Democrat doesn't make them a better politician. And like the guy said in the interview with Lisa, the national DNC funnels money through the states,
Yes.
through the state parties. And so when Gavin Newsom was sending the Democrat in our state donations for the campaign, that was trending on Twitter. And I'm like, yeah, but he got that money from the national. So you got to remember this.
You're right.
oh,
He got
you got
that money from a national, and the national got that money
Mhm.
from the PACs.
Yeah. And they just washed the money that way.
They wash the money, right? And that's why we have to have uh, the party committees in there as a corrupt source of money.
So electing more Democrats isn't the answer.
Yep. Electing the Democrats is not the answer. That is very true. Okay. So let's continue this discussion tomorrow.
Okay.
And just to give some sense of the future, okay, of where I'm going with this, when we finish this particular discussion, okay, of weaknesses and strengths, okay, I then want to go over uh, to design the content of the 3 streams per week. In other words, what are we going to do in the 3 streams per week? Okay, because if this is going to be one of the most important of the dump the incumbents, the dump the corruption shows, then we have to be doing something each week that's going to bring people to our side. Okay, so I would like your help in designing the content that we're going to have on a continuing basis. Okay, so please think about that. And for now, let's see what our friends have said to us for
Oh,
tonight.
something else I'd like to add. I also left that same video I mentioned earlier that was a YouTube from the 11 Alive deal, even in the Facebook comments as well, for those who don't watch the show over on YouTube that are watching from Facebook.
Okay, thank you, Greg. That's really a good idea to put it in both places.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's see. Here we go. Okay, let me get my reading glasses on because I need them to see the comments. There are a number of ways in which getting old sucks. And one of them is that even after you've had the operation to ensure that you can continue to drive, there is still a problem of not being able to see up close, which you could do perfectly well before. Okay, but anyway, so that's why I have computer glasses and I have reading glasses, and they're a little different. Okay, and then I take all my glasses off when I'm driving a car. So it's Steve Wilburn says maybe it's better we throw the hacks in a dumpster. And Steve says Merry Christmas to all. Thank you, Steve. I watched the documentary Everything is a Rich Man's Tick. I highly recommend it. Is that a tick or a trick? I mean, everything is a rich man's trick or everything is a rich man's tick. Steve says DSA has been a great but disappointment. Yeah, it has. That's absolutely right. And Lana says, I mentioned Dump the Corruption to Peter Hager last night. He encouraged me to follow up. Okay, that is, we decided last night that we would hold off, okay, on Jen and Peter's program. Okay, and not um, um, actually schedule it as one of the first interviews. Okay, and that's because all our panel would not be completely comfortable. Okay, with
Yeah,
going
let's go on
on
Pat's show first.
well, yeah, I mean, but I'm not talking about first or second. We selected 7 shows to go after, and because not all of our people were comfortable with Jen's show for the first round, we decided to postpone it. Okay, and, until later. Steve Wolfman says, Lana, that's good. I don't know who he is, though. Yeah, Peter Hager is the co host for Jen Perelman on generational change. I think he's a pretty clever young guy, okay, in many ways. Everybody's saying hello. Steve says, I'm pretty good, brother. Hope you're doing well. Merry Christmas to you, my brother. And he's saying this to Greg. Greg says, I'm doing well. Merry Christmas to you and your family, Steve. Steve says, thank you, sir. He's calling you sir, Greg. And Kay says, hi, all. Happy ho ho. And,
He's awesome.
and Steve says, Doc, mint the coin. Just don't lose it in the couch cushions. Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, that is hilarious. I've heard it, but it's always good for a laugh. Kay says, waiting on a winter storm from hell here. Yeah, we're waiting to see whether the storm is going to bypass us or hit us. We're expecting it, sometime tomorrow, actually. I think it's scheduled to hit Ohio very early in the morning, Kay, isn't it?
Yeah, we got ours already today.
We're getting a light drizzle now here in South Georgia.
How bad was it for you, Brandy?
We had a little bit of freezing rain at the beginning and drizzle, and then it turned into snow, sleet and snow. And we got a little over a dusting, but we're further south. Places further north are going to get more snow than us. So my oldest stepson, Mikey, drives about an hour to work and back on the interstate. And he said that the roads were fine. He got home. He got off work at 3 and drove, and it had already quit by the time he got home. So I'm hoping that everything will be good because they salted the roads and everything for me to drive Friday or Saturday. So I will be available tomorrow night since I'm picking them up on Christmas Eve. So,
okay, well, very good luck, Brandy. And it sounds like you got kind of lucky where you are.
yeah, I'm hoping. I think our biggest issue is the temperatures are dropping so low. We're supposed to get down to like -7 overnight, and the wind chill is like -20.
Oh, yeah. I don't think
And
we're going to get that here.
so people are dealing with power surges.
Yeah,
So,
I'm sure. So Brandy says they're turning our military budget into $1 trillion budget, so we should demand $1 trillion going to us. Well, I generally like that idea, but I think we ought to demand $9 trillion for us
hey, I'm for it.
instead of just $1 trillion,
Yeah.
because we have a lot of needs they've been neglecting year after year
Uh-huh.
after year, where they've been giving the better part of $1 trillion to the defense people year after year, okay, after year,
Yep.
while giving us much less. While the country is deteriorating, they've been doing that crap. So Greg says, Kay says, yep, the next couple of days will be hell here. And Steve Wolfman says, stay safe, fams. Thank you, Steve. Greg Mallard says, it's going to be turning cold here for us in South Georgia, where I'm from. Kay says, not as cold here, Greg, but yes, you are. Steve says, happy solstice to all. Now our days will get longer. Boy, are we looking forward to that. We don't do so well when it comes to driving at night anymore, so
Yeah.
We're kind of constrained more during the winter than we are at other times of year. Steve says, Brandy, ouch. I can't even imagine that. Yeah. Robert Copeland says, lots of politicians didn't support AB 1400 last year as they were bought off by big pharma and health insurance companies. Yeah, I know that. That was so disappointing. It was really like a punch in the gut for those who believe in, the state-based approach. But on the other hand, from the dump the corruption point of view, it really illustrates why we need to dump the corruption at all levels, because it gets just as corrupt at the state levels as it
Hmm.
does at the national level. At least it certainly did in California, and I think it's pretty corrupt out in Washington State as well.
Yeah. It's so corrupt here that, like I said, Tom Cotton's last election, he blackmailed the Democrat off the ballot and then kept Dan from being able to use COVID as a reason for not being able to collect as many signatures to get on the ballot as the state required. And so he had Leslie Rutledge sue and fight Dan in court
Oh God.
to keep him off the ballot. And then, so the only candidate he had against him on the ballot was Ricky Dale Harrington, the Libertarian candidate. And Ricky Dale's a decent guy. He's like Joe Evans. I mean, he
Oh,
reminds me of Joe Evans.
cool.
He's very,
We had one green run for U.S. Senate, but as a write-in candidate because they don't have ballot access for the green, so he registered as an independent because of the bull crap that Kemp pulled in 16 and continues. They will do anything that they can humanly possibly do to keep a leftist candidate off the ballot.
yeah. And so that's where we've got to really fight back. Um, because I do think it's possible, especially in our state. And like I said, every state's different. And so you've got to look at what the laws are in your state. But in our state, the third parties actually get to participate in the debates. And so imagine putting a Green Party candidate up on the stage with a Democrat, a Republican, and a Libertarian.
I know.
Yeah, that would be pretty neat.
Yeah.
I know. Back this past election cycle, talking about a third party candidate on a debate, I got to see it here in Georgia, and it was Republican Brian Kemp, who is the current governor, who won re-election, Stacey Abrams, of course, and Libertarian Shane Hazel. And he did phenomenally well and got a lot of support because of being on that debate stage. He was only in one of the debates, and that was it. And he did phenomenally well, and he called them out for taking corporate PAC money and everything. He literally, a libertarian, he was even saying if elected, he would issue an executive order removing all corporate money from politics
Oh boy.
in the state of Georgia.
Could he do that through executive order?
I don't know. I would have to look up how the state laws work.
Because it seems to me that given decisions by the Supreme Court, that would certainly be viewed by the conservatives on the Supreme Court as unconstitutional.
And also the state Supreme Court of the state of Georgia.
might also view it as unconstitutional. Yeah.
Yeah, and even our state Supreme Court, with us having such a Republican super majority, our state Supreme Court is more liberal, and they've actually ruled against the state and against our legislators on a lot of things.
Well,
So
that's interesting. Why is it so liberal? Were a bunch of them appointed by Bill Clinton?
I'm I don't think so. Um, I don't think that they're that old. We
That old.
do vote on some of them, and so they get elected by the people. And I think some of these people may vote one way for a politician, but on social issues, they tend to vote another way.
Yes.
And that's what we see with the ballot initiatives in our state as well. We've got quite a bit higher minimum wage than the federal. The federal's like 7.25, 7.50. Our minimum wage in the state of Arkansas is $14 an hour.
Oh boy, you've almost reached the $15 an hour level at the state level.
Yeah.
I do know. I'm gonna share talking while we're on the topic of state minimum wage. Here in the state of Georgia, our current state minimum wage is still at $5.85 an hour.
Yeah. And see, we did that through ballot initiative. They did try to fight it, of course, but they lost. They've tried to fight the medical marijuana as well, and they lost. We even have the ability in Arkansas through ballot initiative to change our state constitution, and they can't do anything about it. So, what they've been trying to do to combat us with the ballot initiatives is by trying to make it to where we have to have, like right now, we only have to have 51% of the vote to pass. And they've been trying to raise that to 60.
Wow.
And it's failed every time they've tried it.
Good. So Steve Wolfbrand says 60 degrees here in Los Angeles is below zero. Yeah, I can understand that, of course, because as you know, my daughter lives not too far from.
Okay, Steve, I'm packing up and coming to California to enjoy some warmth.
Hey, you'll get to go see Sakura and Noah.
That
They're
would be
in
a
California.
plus. And then I would also go and visit Devora as well.
Yep.
Visit all three of them, and plus go and visit Steve.
Oh, you're going to have a ball out there, Greg.
Oh, I'd go if I could.
So Steve Wolfbrand says, be careful about the carbon monoxide. Don't be burning stuff in your house.
No, we know. They've put out a list of how to stay warm if you lose power.
As a former construction worker, I'm going to have to say this. Be sure to thoroughly clean your chimneys. And
we don't have a fireplace.
And to those who do, be sure to have your fireplace and your chimneys professionally inspected and cleaned, so that way you don't have all that soot, the creosote, the stuff in your chimneys that will combust in there and cause a house fire.
Yeah. They've opened up warming centers because we did have a homeless couple last year die in the park from freezing to death.
Oh my God.
And then, with power going out, a lot of people who only have the electric heat have no source of heat if they don't have a generator or a gas stove or a wood burning stove. And a lot of us don't have any of it. So that's like worst case scenario. And they said also to check your car batteries, because it dropping down this cold can cause your car batteries to drain.
So Steve Wolfbrand says, I want to date AOC. So Greg Mallard does him one better and says, I'd rather date Zara Sultana from the UK. Robert Copeland says, every political race that I can vote on in November elections was a Democrat versus Democrat or Democrat versus Republican. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I don't think the Green Party did too well in California this year.
And then, like in my state house and Senate seat, we didn't even have a Democrat on the ballot. It was Republican versus Libertarian. And then for uh, Boozman, the Libertarian was as bad as the Republican. So I had nobody because it was a Democrat, it was the Libertarian, and it was Republican.
Yeah, we haven't had anybody either. There was a challenge to Jennifer Wexton by a Republican.
Yeah.
But there was nobody else to vote for on the ticket. So
And the Democrat running against Boozman, her typical answer to working on health care was to increase access.
yeah.
And
An empty reply.
yeah. So I was like, no, not even wasting my time.
So Steve Wolfbrand says, hello, Robert. This is to Robert Copeland. And Robert Copeland says, I don't like Steve Grumbine. I don't know why that got into the conversation. But Greg Mallett says, howdy, Robert.
Yeah, I was talking in the chat as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are blocked by Steve Grumbine on Twitter. So.
Oh, you're blocked on Twitter by Steve Grumbine?
Oh yeah, I've been ever since him and
It's like
all
a
them
reward.
started the Red Beret, started going after the Red Berets. I got blocked for saying we should work together on things that we could agree upon. I got blocked by Steve Grumbine for that.
Yeah, when I got blocked was in 2018. I believe it was. I was streaming for RP then.
Yeah.
And anyway, there were a bunch of us who became dissatisfied. Okay, it was Andres Bernal, DC Rutledge, and Matt Waldy. Okay, Matt wanted to put in proposals to what do they call it? The project management team, I think it was called. And he wanted to put in, a few proposals for change. Steve was very dogmatic against having any change. And the whole thing erupted into a fight. And so the three of them left, and I followed 2 days later. And that's when he blocked me.
It's like a reward. It's a Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is like an award. He's blocked so many people. It's just incredible. Greg says, I hope you and your family have a Merry Christmas, Robert. Yeah, Robert, I hope that too. Steve says, I don't care for Grumbine either. Steve Wolfbrand says. Robert says, I got blocked on Twitter by Steve Grumbine. Yeah, you probably did in the Red Berets fight that we had. Greg says, Grumbine has me blocked too, so you all aren't alone here. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. Hit the like button. Thanks, Robert, sir. Happy ho-ho, Robert.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Steve says, watch the documentary Everything is a Big Man's Trick, unquote. So it was trick. You will learn so much. Kay sent a bunch of hearts to Steve Wolfbrandt, by the way. Lana says, I'm trying to update my resume while listening. Peter Hager is with Jen Perelman, who ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Florida. Her show is called Generational Change. Yeah. Okay, it is. And Robert Combs says, here in California, we have had the Green Party and the Peace and Freedom Party joining forces in the 2022 elections. 2018 elections, the Green Party had a number of very good candidates running.
We had a Fayetteville City city council member that was a member of the Green Party, and then I got really disappointed with her in 2020 because she was telling everybody to vote for Joe Biden. And
Yep.
she was Green Party. And it's like, you're not even supporting your party candidate
Yeah,
who is better than Joe Biden.
he certainly is. Certainly is better than Joe Biden any day in the week.
Yeah, and I voted for him. So,
well, good for you.
A dog turd is better than Joe Biden.
Then there's Cora Emanuel. Actually, by the way, okay, though Joe Biden has done some good things, his foreign policy,
sucks.
His foreign policy sucks. Okay, he's been revealed as a sellout of the unions, or he revealed himself to be a sellout. Okay, the unions. He's also a sellout when it comes to Medicare for all. He stood still for a bill that only temporarily allowed for child tax credits.
mm-hmm.
He botched the student debt elimination thing. But he's risking our very lives with his foreign policy and with his lack of action on the Green New Deal. So all in all, I'd say he has been a terrible president. But I'm really infuriated about his empowering those neocons in foreign policy and letting the neocons run things. That is so suicidal. Cora Emanuel says, corruption is so ingrained in our system for many decades. I feel that it requires reinstating and strengthening anti-corruption laws.
Mm-hmm.
Start ending corruption, okay, and big money. I completely agree with that, Cora, but we'll never get the anti-corruption laws passed
Until we replace them.
Yes, until we replace those candidates who are taking the big money.
Yep.
So we have to dump the corruption first.
Yeah, we have to crawl before we can walk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Robert Colton says most likely it's stage 4 cancer if he's in hospice care. That would be my guess. Would be my guess also.
Yeah, and it's just thinking about it. I know there's fast developing cancers. My mother had the rapid acute myeloid leukemia. But still, if we had a Medicare for all system, everybody could get their regular checkups. It wouldn't cost you out the wazoo to get testing done, whether you're having symptoms or not. So then everybody gets taken care of. It costs, with 2 forms of insurance, it cost me $1,000 to get my colonoscopy and endoscopies. And I have to get the endoscopies every couple years because I have a history of ulcers.
Oh God, that's awful.
So anytime my GERD is acting up, they want to go in and check because of that. So, I've been getting them about every 2 to 3 years.
All right, and I know you're stuck in Arkansas for personal reasons, right?
Yeah, with my kids. So,
I was also thinking with the talks on Medicare for all, it would be very beneficial to also state governments because they're no longer having to cover Medicaid any longer because it would save the state's money on the state's budget that they can put toward other things. And you would think Republican governors would support Medicare for all because that's less money that they are having to put into the state budget each year.
it's also better for employers. Sorry, I have a cat jumping on my desk.
That's fine.
The employers would not have to spend that money. So, like with my insurance, I also have an HSA card that I contribute $12 every 2 weeks to. My company contributes $60 to my HSA card for every 12 I put in. So I wind up with $72 on it every 2 weeks to help go towards my prescriptions or any medical. So at least I've got that. And trust me, I spend it on my prescriptions.
Oh, I trust you.
I can't even get my inhaler right now.
Jesus.
And still working on prior authorizations, waiting on that for the Dupixent for my asthma. And it's been months that we've been trying to get me on that because I don't handle the steroids well.
And this system is it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's also an injustice,
Yeah.
just like with cannabis.
Yep.
Can you imagine how much money our state governments could save by not incarcerating people on cannabis?
Yes,
Well,
I know exactly how much.
and not just that, the reason why we need the federal cannabis law is as long as it's illegal federally, that means your insurance is not going to cover it. It also means that you cannot, like, I have to go to the bank and withdraw cash to go buy my prescription for my cannabis. You cannot use any type of credit card or debit card to get it.
I know. I have the same thing here.
Yeah. And so my insurance goes towards none of it, and it's expensive.
Yes, it is.
And at the federal level, too, like I get my health care from the VA. So here you're talking that the VAs, unless it's made legal federally, veterans can't.
Yeah.
Get the
Veterans
cannabis.
cannot. No.
And
My stepson's active duty National Guard, and he can't, even if he was with me and I was running in, he can't even go with me or drive me if I'm not feeling well, because he can't even be seen in the parking lot of a dispensary.
Oh boy, that's awful.
Terrible.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
And something else with Medicare for all talks that needs to be addressed is totally 100% abolishing the Hyde Amendment. That has to go.
Oh, I know that
Yeah.
absolutely has to go.
Yep.
The Hyde Amendment isn't in HR 1976. If we could get that bill passed, that's one of the big advantages. Okay, so Steve said to Lana he would be happy to give her a referral.
Reference.
Right, okay, because Lana is looking for a new job. So Lana thanked him. And Steve said, but Lana Dell, of course, I would make you sound like a super ma'am. So then Steve replies and he says, "Man?" Question mark.
Steve, you're awesome.
And Robert says, "Joe, my dad said getting old is no fun." Well, that is generally true in certain areas of life. But on the other hand, with Bonnie and I, we are finding that other than the disadvantages of getting old, it's really nice to be together all the time. And we have great fun every day. So, if you're set up with the right person, getting old can be a lot of fun.
Yeah, me and Jay both work from home. So we're around each other 24/7 pretty much.
And so there is a lot of fun in that, right?
Yeah. I mean, he has his things that he likes to do, and I have my stuff that I do like this. And so he streams he likes Warhammer. And so he gets the miniatures and paints them and streams that and streams video games. And the boys stream on Twitch
I just shared
because
something.
all of our kids are gamers.
I just shared an interesting article that I found in Sandy's group, Environmental Coffee House.
Yeah, that's Sandy Shellis. So Lana says, "Okay, I'll let you follow up then. I wasn't trying to put Jen first. I just happened to catch him without Jen last night, and he was talking about the money and politics problem. That seemed like an opportunity." Yeah, I think you're right about that, Lana. Uh, okay, I think we will be getting there at some point. And thank you for thinking about it, by the way, and thank you for trying. Oh, and by the way, if you need a referral, then I'm volunteering also.
Yeah.
And I won't make you sound like Superman. Steve Wolfbrand says, "My mother used to say getting old is a bummer, but the alternative is worse." Yeah, we feel that way too. It does suck, but I want to see how the story ends. Perhaps it never ends. That would defy the laws of the universe. Cases getting old sucks. I'd rather be out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Wolfbrand says, "Old." Robert says, "Homeless people dying because it is too cold is common here in Sacramento." And Steve Wolfbrand says, "I wan." Oh, he says, "Owing." Yes, owing. Kay says, "Thankfully, I'm not homeless yet." Robert said, "Another person who blocked me was Savage Joy." Yeah, she's
Yeah.
another. She's another really delightful person. I'm sorry, I know sarcasm is the cheapest form of wit. Kay says, "I can't stand her, Robert."
Who can?
Steve Wolfbrand says, "Investigate Hugh." Oh, Hunter. He means Hunter.
Yeah.
Investigate Hunter. Yeah, looks like Hunter's going to get investigated now.
Yeah. Honestly, investigate them all.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. I don't care.
Yep. Me too.
So I'm not going to defend either one of them.
And Robert says, I won't either. Robert says, one way you can help fund CalCare is by having a public bank. Yes,
Hmm.
that's right. And
And
so help fund whole Washington that way as well.
yes, and Roger on Twitter. Let me find him.
Something else that could also help fund whole Washington and CalCare is also taxation from cannabis.
Yep.
If you're not following this guy, you should be. He's the one that got all the independent channels talking about ballot initiatives and pushing for ballot initiatives. And he's also working on public banks as well.
Okay, and who is the guy?
It's Roger. I cannot remember his last name. It was his birthday the other day. But he's on RBN, Sabby. He's the one that got her to do the show about ballot initiatives, the panels, and she's really pushing for him now. He got Kira with HLN talking about him and everything, and he's working with the Red Berets in New York because he lives in New York State. And he's a wealth of knowledge on ballot initiatives and public banking. So if you're not already following him, you should be.
Okay, thank you, Brandy. Of course, in public banking, one of the best writers is Ellen Brown. Okay, if anybody cares to know about her, she's really been a big help to the movement over the years. Robert Copeland says, my dad and stepmom were married for almost 45 years until my stepmom died last year.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, sorry to hear about that, Robert. 45 years is good. Lana says, that's very nice of you also. Thanks. Well, of course, Lana, you know. How many years have we been friends now? It's getting to be a while. Steve says, Joe makes getting old like fun. And Lana says, savage joy is toxic joy. Yeah.
Just hearing her voice makes me want to jab an ice pick in both ears.
Steve Opran says, Kay won't be homeless. I won't let that happen. Kay says, thank you, Steve.
All right. I'm going to have to head out on you guys. I've got to get these babies ready for bed, and so I can go to bed myself.
Okay, thank you for being here, Brandy.
You're welcome.
It was a fine conversation.
Yep.
Thank you, Dee, and thank you, Greg. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was.
Okay, almost as much fun as getting old.
Oh, yeah, I remember when my father, he used to say about getting, well, he used to say, well, the one thing was getting old is not for sissies. And then he's always,
Yes, it's not for sissies. We can attest to that.
yeah, so
My
then he
dad.
would get up in the morning, my father, he'd have his coffee and he said, I got to put my parts on, and he'd put his, the ears on, the ear hearing aids. He'd have his glasses. Then he'd have to put his teeth in, just putting your parts on is part of getting old.
My dad, who is 74, also says that same quote. He also says getting old ain't for sissies, but he says it in the South Georgia tone.
Well, you know, he's a youngster at 74.
I'm gonna tell him you said that.
Have I ever told you how old we are?
Thinking you're 8. I think you told me once or twice. I think you may have told me once or twice.
Okay, we're 83, and next month I'm 84.
What a coincidence! Next month I turn 32.
Oh, next month. Yeah.
Rubbed it in.
Yeah, so we have birthdays the same month.
That's interesting.
So what's your day?
17th.
Okay, mine is the 8th.
Well, we'll have to have like a special birthday stream for the two of us.
I suppose. And Steve Wilkbrand says, good night, everyone. Good night, Steve. Robert Copeland says, Joe, that depends on your health. Yes, that's right, Robert. It does depend on your health. Steve Wolfbrand says, getting old is interesting. Yes, in certain ways, it is very interesting. Okay, thank you, everyone, for a fun stream. I'll see you
Y'all
tomorrow.
have a great night.
Yes, thank you for having us, Joe.
Or, and I hope that I'll see you two tomorrow also.
You
Yes,
will.
sir. Y'all have a great night.
So thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Good night.